Hola. Welcome to your weekly math lesson. Mi nombre es Clovis, for any first-time viewers. Allow me to begin by saying it's my sincere hope that among the modest number of folks that was present during the previous episode, any of y'all that took on the challenge was successful in your attempt to determine whether x squared plus 6x plus 9 is in fact a parabola. And if any of y'all went to a museum and tried to take a picture inside it, I hope you got away with it. In our society, breaking the rules always carries a risk, even when sometimes breaking the rules is necessary, or even when it's totally unnecessary, as in the case of last week's challenge. But now back to parabolas. If you follow the assignment and plug reasonable numbers into the function of x squared plus 6x plus 9, and then you graphed and connected the resulting points, you should have seen a parabola emerge. The larger truth is that if you follow that same procedure with any polynomial that the highest exponential number in it is a 2, you're going to see a parabola winning if you graph it. And then, some point in your math career, you may decide it's time to just start presuming that any polynomial that's got an x squared at the front of it is and will always be a parabola. And now back to this situation on the side of me from the previous lesson. We can clearly see that the top side of the square is made up of an x and a 3, commonly known as x plus 3. Meanwhile, on the side, say the same thing, x plus 3. Now you may remember about how since this expression up here is a trinomial, it's probably going to split up into two binomials. Well, there go them two binomials. And just so you ain't got to take it on faith, x times x, x times 3, x times 3, 3 times 3. There you go. Now obviously, since these two binomials is the same thing, I could just write them like this. i.e., the binomial of x plus 3 squared. And now, finally, back to the terminology of quadratic. The situation is this. When it comes to the issue of the terminology of quadratic, so far it all kind of add up. Here go a square. The way you get the area of a square is by timesing something by itself. So maybe it makes sense when you times something by itself, like x plus 3, you're going to call it squaring. And if it turned into this, after you've done squared it, kind of makes sense to say this expression up here is based on squaring. And lastly, when you're trying to figure out what to call this expression that came out of squaring, you may as well remember that in the language of Latin, the word for square is quadratus. And then be like, all right, we're going to call this expression that's based on squaring a quadratic expression. But not so fast. That sequence of logic may explain why this parabolic expression got called a quadratic, but it don't necessarily explain why all the parabolic expressions in creation is called a quadratic. Why not? Because not all parabolas can be expressed as a perfect square, which is what this is. And as attractively simple and straightforward an idea as that would be, that all parabolas is basically a perfect square, I don't recommend you try to make it work for every parabola you encounter. But as it turns out, even if not all parabolas is a perfect square, any parabola can be expressed as a perfect square of something, with a couple adjustments added on that affect some aspects of how it appears on a graph. Furthermore, when it eventually comes to solving parabolic equations and trying to figure out what all these unknown x's stand for, you can always use a geometrical square to do it. As odd a concept as that may seem to be at the present time. And finally, once you understand them two additional facts about parabolas, number one, that they all kind of built around a perfect square, even if they ain't a perfect square in and of themselves, like this one. And number two, that you can always use a square when you're trying to figure out what the x's in them mean. Then you may have a satisfactory answer to the question of why are parabolas called quadratics? As with so much in math though, I hardly expect you to accept them two additional topics without seeing them in action. And to do that, more math is required. So now you're confronted with a choice. On the one hand, you can patiently wait for a video in which I attempt to explain these additional topics in a clear and concise manner. On the understanding, I ain't necessarily gonna make no more math videos. Alternatively, you can do a computer search for one or more of these topics right here. Watch somebody else's explanation. Then eventually, you're gonna be on your way to a more complete understanding of why parabolas is always getting called quadratics. Alright, that's all I got. Bye. In the courthouse, dividing up the fortune. It's such a sad case of misfortune.